On the Buzz Meter from New York this Sunday, the media pounce on President Trump for suggesting Barack Obama and others rarely or never call the families of fallen soldiers, and play up a congresswoman's harsh account of his phone call to a widow, which was strongly disputed by General John Kelly.
Earlier you said that President Obama never called the families of fallen soldiers. How can you make that claim?
I don't know if he did. No. I was told that he didn't often, and a lot of presidents don't. They write letters. I do.
The part about President Obama was false, and just moments later, when confronted with that falsehood, the president said in so many words, "I don't know, I was told, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, oh, and maybe other presidents didn't call her right." And that, too, was false.
Now someone's politicizing the entire event.
I don't think anyone who hears this story, Democrat or Republican, would actually think that if the President of the United States is going to call the wife, that he would belittle her.
It is one thing if the president inadvertently spoke in an unintentionally callous manner to somebody he should have prepared better to speak to. It is another matter when the president then called on that, chooses to deride the grieving family of a fallen soldier as liars.
You have to be a really sick, twisted, ugly person that puts politics first, which most of the media is today, to think that the president got up out of bed, purposely got on the phone, and wanted to hurt this family after what happened to them.
Is the press holding Trump accountable or holding him to a different standard than other presidents? Nearly half of Americans believe major news outlets fabricate stories about Trump. Really? Are his fake news attacks taking a toll? Jimmy Kimmel admits that his political attacks are driving away Republican viewers and says he probably wouldn't want to have a conversation with them anyway. Is this the new reality of late night? As new women make accusations against Harvey Weinstein, huge numbers of women speak out about sexual harassment and assault under the hashtag #MeToo.
When something this major happens, when you have the fallout, 50 women coming forward, that it's a watershed moment. It's triggering a lot of unreleased pain, repressed anger, guilt, and suffering that a lot of women have had.
Can all this media coverage help change the culture? Plus, a front-page New York Times story on a huge settlement of sexual harassment allegations against Bill O'Reilly, a case that hasn't been public until now. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. It began with a press conference question about why President Trump hadn't said anything publicly about 4 American soldiers killed in Niger. He said his predecessors only rarely called the families of the fallen, and moments later said that's what he'd been told. The next day, the president made such a call, and there was a media explosion when Democratic Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who was there, said he made the sergeant's mother cry.
This man is a sick man. He's cold-hearted, and he feels no pity or sympathy for anyone.
What did you hear? Tell us about this phone call.
Well, I didn't hear the whole phone call, but I did hear him say, I'm sure he knew what he was signing up for, and but it still hurts.
Didn't say what that congresswoman said. Didn't say it at all. She knows it, and she now is not saying it. I did not say what she said, and I'd like her to make the statement again, because I did not say what she said. I had a very nice conversation with the woman.
And I think it, frankly, is a disgrace of the media to try to portray an act of kindness like that and that gesture and to try to make it into something that it isn't.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage here in New York, Shelby Holliday, senior video reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Jessica Tarlov, senior director at Bustle and a Fox News contributor. And Kimberly Guilfoyle, co-host of The Five. And Kimberly, what really made this whole thing explode was the condolence call to the mother of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, who told the Washington Post he disrespected his son. And you had Congresswoman Wilson all over TV denouncing him. Now, there were all these stories saying it's racial because Wilson is black, Sergeant Johnson was black, and the congresswoman says the White House is full of white supremacists. Are the media taking the bait here? Racial?
I think the media is taking the bait, and I think it's the bait that is being proffered up by Frederica Wilson. I think it's really shameful to be politically opportunistic in a time of grief for a family to come out and make those statements. Some things should be sacrosanct. Does anybody think that the President of the United States would not show incredible compassion and kindness to someone grieving, losing a family member like that, losing a son that they love so dearly, who's given up everything for this country. It's sad that it has fallen this far in terms of just being disrespectful to the loss of loved ones, and I don't think that she gained anything by this, and John Kelly did a fantastic job representing
We'll come back to him, and the whole thing is just said. But Jessica, you can argue both sides are politicizing it. President Trump went on Twitter and called the Congresswoman wacky and other things. But the media are trumpeting almost everything this previously obscure Florida Congresswoman says, and she says now, she actually comes out and says it, I'm a rock star.
Yeah, no, the rock star comment I certainly wouldn't have gone for, and I don't think that accusing General Kelly, I know we're going to talk about him in a little while, for being racist, for his comments, was the way to go here. But I do believe it's important to hold on to the fact that this began with President Trump in the press conference when he talked about what Barack Obama had or hadn't done, which ended up revealing that he had had private conversations with General Kelly about what happened when General Kelly lost his son 7 years ago
in Afghanistan.
And, you know, we thank everyone involved for their service to our country, and whether that conversation was with President Trump or with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who then got herself into some sticky business later on in the week with her comments, which I'm sure we'll get to. We can't lose sight of the fact that this did begin with the president. So while I think that Frederica Wilson went perhaps too far, Donald Trump played a key role in this.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of fair coverage. There's a lot of unfair coverage here, in my view. But the president at that news conference wasn't asked about, did you call anybody? He was asked about why you didn't discuss it publicly. So did he open the door to what's become a week of coverage in a way that almost nobody looks good in this thing?
Yes, what's unbelievable about this whole story is we've been talking about who called who said what, and the question that was asked in the Rose Garden has yet to be answered. We still don't know all the details of what happened in Niger, and the reporter was simply asking why we hadn't heard from the president about those 4 fallen soldiers. We don't know all the answers. However, we have ended up here 5 days later. The political football continues to be thrown. And the unfortunate thing is that everybody is politicizing this, from President Trump and you could say General Kelly to the Congresswoman and even to the families of the soldiers.
Well, you've all talked about General Kelly. So let's just revisit the moment when John Kelly, White House Chief of Staff, who, as we said, lost a son in Afghanistan, came out in the briefing room and said this.
I was stunned when I came to work yesterday morning and brokenhearted at what I saw a member of Congress doing. He knew what he was getting himself into because he enlisted, and he was where he wanted to be, exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly the people he wanted to be with when his life was taken. That was the message.
General Kelly, who heard the call, defending the condolence call, did he in those moments bring the focus back, at least briefly, to the sacrifice, in this case, the ultimate sacrifice made by American soldiers?
Absolutely, and who better to speak to that than a man who lost his own son, okay, and is a Gold Star family member as well. So anyone who suggests that this man was trying to politicize it, you know, he's a 4-star Marine general. This isn't a man who's been a politician in his life. He's continuing to serve his country honorably and faithfully by being in a position that is not easy, okay? And when he talked about that, that was bringing something very personal and raw from his family in defense in a natural spirit, because he was in the room and was outraged by what had happened. A lot of people step back, they don't say anything, they go ahead and let people take hits. He didn't do that. He stood up and held the line and told the truth about what happened. And I think that the winner in that was General Kelly, and Frederica Wilson then shamed herself by then the next day going out and attacking another, you know, Gold Star family member with John Kelly.
At the same time, Jessica, some of the media demanding that Kelly apologize because it turned out he didn't accurately describe a speech the Congresswoman had given 2 years earlier in dedicating a building to 2 fallen FBI agents. He said she bragged about getting money for the building, and the video showed that she did not. So he sort of got sucked into this as well.
He absolutely did, and I blame President Trump for that. John Kelly is an incredibly private man who has made it clear that he doesn't want to speak about the loss of his son. He went out there, I think, for the sake of the administration and to also defend President Trump's call. He didn't refute, by the way, the account of the mother or Frederica Wilson of what actually happened on the call. He just said, you know, his intentions were good. And I believe that in a condolence call, Donald Trump's intentions were good.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because in all of the criticism and the media furor, it seems that very few journalists are willing to say, you know, maybe there were some awkward moments in that call. It's a hard call to make, and the president was trying to do the right thing.
Which apparently is why General Kelly has advised him in the past not to actually make the call. It's too difficult of a time time. It's too sensitive. And there is tape released, actually, of President Trump making a condolence call where I think he said all the right things and told, you know, young kids, your father died a hero, which is exactly what you should be saying.
He's doing the right thing. Yeah, but he's doing the right thing. He's not doing the politically expedient, safe thing. He's saying, I feel your loss. I care for your family. Thank you for your service. And by the way, General Kelly is a four-star Marine general. Nobody's forcing him to do anything. This is a man who stands up and does what he believes in. So to blame President Trump for General Kelly coming up and telling the truth, I think is very disingenuous.
He didn't tell the truth, though. He lied about the 2015 comments. He also said that the Democrats were responsible for the politicization in the DNC convention, but there were Gold Star families on the stage at the RNC as well.
Let me jump in and ask you, Shelby, about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who in the course of defending General Kelly said something that has really created another media furor within the larger explosion here. Let's take a look.
If you want to go after General Kelly, that's up to you. But I think that if you want to get into a debate with a four-star Marine general, I think that's something highly inappropriate.
Well, CNN's Wolf Blitzer said Sarah Huckabee Sanders should apologize. Jake Tapper said it was one of the most shocking things he had heard from the podium. Now, did she mean, in reality, did she mean to say that a four-star general should never be questioned, or that in this particular instance, talking about fallen soldiers, as she later says, she's saying it's inappropriate to impugn his credibility on how to honor fallen soldiers?
I don't know what was in her heart, but I will say taking her words as fact are troubling for a lot of reporters, because what she's saying is you shouldn't question this person the administration put out in front of you to answer the questions. And General Kelly did answer questions that day. It's perfectly fair to ask him questions. It's perfectly fair to question what he said. When you're a reporter, that's your job. General Kelly is a hero. His son, who died serving our country, is a hero. Nobody can argue that. But you can say, as you come out in front of the press as a member of this administration, and you are no longer only associated with the military, you're associated with this administration. You have to answer questions.
And now you have reporters from many organizations calling every Gold Star family they can find. Did the president call you? One grieving family was put on CNN saying they didn't get a call.
Yeah, it's a grief check to see whether or not the president is compassionate enough to have gone down the list. I mean, the bottom line is the president's trying to do the right thing. General Kelly did the right thing by standing up. And then what happened? Frederica Wilson called him a racist because of the neighborhood he grew up in, saying he's an Irish Catholic, which I take exception to as an Irish Puerto Rican Catholic. So how dare she then interject race in it? Because we all bleed the same color. It has nothing to do with whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, woman, man that served this country faithfully. And it really is disrespectful to those that have lost family members to continue in that vein.
And I would just say calling up, I'm not saying it's illegitimate for reporters to call, but I can't think of another president who's ever been subjected to that standard. And finally, all the press is saying, wow, why didn't the president talk about the 4 deaths in Niger? When you go back and we looked at the 4 days of coverage, you know, the evening news, most of them gave it 38 seconds, 45 seconds. NBC News did do 2 minutes. Fox did the most, but it was a 4.5-minute report. MSNBC, CNN, a couple of 2-minute reports. New York Times and Washington Post had 3 stories each. So where was the press before it was a Trump controversy? Where was the press in talking about this horrible ambush
on Monday with a question, but that was still 12 days later. I mean, we lost 4 Green Berets. This should have been a much bigger topic. So that is the original press fail. It turned into many further press fails and many administration fails as well.
All right.
But I certainly
let me get a break. MediaBuzz at foxnews.com if you want to write to us. Ahead on MediaBuzz from New York. 2 former presidents take not-so-veiled shots at the current one, and many pundits are on board. Kennedy will be here. When we come back, that New York Times report on Bill O'Reilly settling a major sexual harassment case, a story that he's calling a smear. O'Reilly signed a big contract deal last February before he was later ousted over a series of legal settlements involving sexual harassment allegations. But the New York Times reported yesterday that Fox's parent, 21st Century Fox, knew at the time of a sexual harassment settlement between O'Reilly and former Fox legal analyst Lise Wheel. That settlement worth $32 million, although the company was not told the amount. Wheel alleged that over a period of 15 years, she was subjected to repeated harassment along with a non-consensual sexual relationship. O'Reilly wouldn't discuss the details with the Times, but said he never mistreated anyone, that the allegations against him were politically and financially motivated. Last night, he called the story a smear. 21st Century Fox said in a statement it didn't know the details of the private settlement with Lise Wheel, and that Fox News, quote, surely would have wanted to renew the contract of the biggest star in cable news. According to an internal email from 21st Century Fox's general counsel, the Times reported, prosecutors looking into the allegations involving the late Fox News chairman Roger Ailes had a, quote, legal theory that, quoting again, we hid the fact that we had a problem with Roger, and now it will be applied to O'Reilly, and they will insist on full knowledge of all complaints about O'Reilly's behavior in the workplace, regardless of who settled them. Joining us now from Los Angeles is Matt Bellany, editor of The Hollywood Reporter. Matt, O'Reilly boasted on the air that he boosted Lise Wheel's career by putting her on his show. The settlement worth an eye-popping $32 million out of his pocket. So while Bill O'Reilly is calling the allegations crap, it does not look good, does it?
No, absolutely not. It doesn't look good for O'Reilly because the first question you have is, if these allegations are crap, why spend $32 million to settle them? That is an extraordinary amount of money. And the second question is for Fox News, even if you really wanted to re-sign Bill O'Reilly, Megyn Kelly had left, Roger Ailes had left, why did you not inquire as to the nature of the settlement and more specifically the amount of the settlement? I mean, did you not have if not a legal, a moral duty to look into that amid the culture and some of the claims that have been made against Fox News?
So is it your impression, based on what the Times reported, which included the fact that the lawyers for the company kept the Murdoch family informed, that 21st Century Fox wanted to keep this particular one involving Lise Wheel from becoming public at a time that it was dealing with the fallout and a federal investigation involving the allegations that surrounded Roger Ailes?
I think that's what it looks like. It looks like there was an effort to re-sign O'Reilly, look the other way, or willfully don't inquire about the nature of this settlement, and then move forward. They did put a protection in the deal where if other allegations came up, they could terminate his employment, which ultimately happened. But amid this investigation, and there was also this overarching effort to buy the rest of the Sky broadcaster in the UK. Mm-hmm. That's always been a Murdoch goal, and there's another inquiry there. It just seems like the effort was look the other way, and hopefully this will work out.
Right. So you're not buying the notion that because this was done as a private legal settlement between two parties, Bill O'Reilly, Lise Wheel, that the company didn't have any responsibility other than, as you say, did put clauses in the new contract, which didn't last that long, that if new allegations surfaced, it could be cause for termination.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that, because even though this was a, quote, private settlement and, a deal between O'Reilly and this analyst, this was a Fox News employee for 15 years. So it's not like this was some woman who he met at a party or a woman that was solely in his private life. The allegations concern behavior that allegedly occurred at Fox News and between a Fox News person and Bill O'Reilly. So why would you not just inquire about that?
Does this resonate even more given the huge media uproar over Harvey Weinstein, which you and I talked about last time you were on, and mounting questions about who knew what when at his former company? Do you think that is making, and this would be a big story regardless, making it an even bigger story because of the sharp media focus on these kinds of allegations?
I think that's true. I mean, the first and foremost thing is Bill O'Reilly is trying to get back into the cable news world or the news broadcasting world. So I think these claims coming forward and this settlement coming forward now is a product of that. But also the culture has completely changed after Bill Cosby, after Roger Ailes, after all of these allegations have been made against very powerful people. The Harvey Weinstein thing comes in. Mm-hmm. Now there are other allegations against people in Hollywood. This morning, a director, James Toback, has been accused by 30 women of harassing them. There was a producer at Nickelodeon who was fired last week. It's all coming forward.
It seems to be a different climate. Matt Bellany, thank you for joining us. I just want to say 21st Century Fox has been trying to move on from this mess, hiring a bunch of new female executives and on-air hosts, among other steps. But this is a significant setback for Fox. It is no question about it. It's embarrassing. It's disappointing that O'Reilly was giving a new contract under these circumstances. I hope it doesn't impede the progress that the company has been trying to make, which, and in the end, the company did fire its biggest moneymakers. Up next, the media awash in new allegations against Harvey Weinstein. What does that tell us about the Hollywood culture and the culture of the press? And later, Trish Regan on how the Weinstein case is spurring an online campaign in which many women are saying, "Me too." Is this changing the situation? Every day, it seems, there have been new revelations and allegations involving Harvey Weinstein, his company, and now a spate of criminal investigations.
Harvey Weinstein cut the last link to the management of his former media empire as the sex scandal widens. And this morning, his brother Bob Weinstein is also facing a sexual harassment allegation.
Los Angeles police now investigating a new claim of sexual assault, and yet another Oscar winner opening up now about her encounters with Weinstein.
We're back with the panel. Kimberly Guilfoyle, we just talked about the situation at Fox News. You have the sheer volume of allegations now against Harvey Weinstein. Criminal probes, 6 women charging rape, many others charging other things. Beyond Weinstein, why has this become such a huge cultural story in your
Well, because there's now such a bright light, shone on it, where people are like, okay, let's really talk about this. Let's make sure. And then courageous women coming forward have encouraged others to come forward. And you've really seen this, especially with the Weinstein case, because one after the next, you build on strength. And so you've seen now all of them coming forward to share and give their voice. And having prosecuted cases of sexual assault in Los Angeles District Attorney's Office as assistant DA, and in San Francisco, we take these cases very seriously. And this is not just, sexual harassment. There are specific allegations of sexual assault and misconduct that now there's multiple investigations, including internationally with Scotland Yard. So this is just basically scratching the surface of this case. We're going to hear a lot more about it.
Right. Originally, Shelby, I thought that it was just because you had famous actresses involved, names like Angelina Jolie and Gwyneth Paltrow. But now I think it is just, and maybe all these other cases, which also stretch back to David Letterman, who kind of got a pass for his conduct with his own staff. I think it has just touched some kind of cultural nerve. Your thoughts?
It absolutely has, and it, in some ways, it's this perfect media story. It's Hollywood. You have glamorous actresses, as you said. Terrible, terrible allegations, stories you never wanted to hear, but they're real and they exist. And I think that's why so many women have come forward. There's power in numbers, as Kim said, one after the other. Once you hear someone else is courageous enough to do this, I think these women feel they are able to do it as well. And it's not just with him, it's with other producers. We just saw an Amazon head get fired because of the same exact thing. I think the dominoes will continue to fall. But generally, the Me Too movement and just this empowering women movement we've seen online is something that I think we wouldn't have seen had only one person come forward.
More on that next segment, but Jessica Tarlov, you have other people now coming out who knew and admitting they knew, and one classic example is the director Quentin Tarantino, who worked a lot with Harvey Weinstein, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, and all those movies, telling the New York Times he knew for a fact because his former girlfriend, Mia Sorvino, the actress, and another actress told him about it, and he knew about the settlement with another actress named Rose McGowan. He says to the Times he feels ashamed. I knew enough to do more than I did. Tarantino says, I wish I'd taken responsibility for what I heard. If I had done the work I should have done then, I would not have had to work with him. What I did was marginalize the incidents. Anything I say now will sound like a crappy excuse. Okay, crappy excuse, too little, too late.
But way better than what a lot of other men have said. So I applaud Quentin Tarantino for at least putting that statement out there, and hopefully more men who did know about it, because it obviously was quite an open secret, will say that instead of, I have to say something because I have a bunch of daughters.
Isn't it easier to do now after the whole world is piling on?
100% it's easier. And to the point that both Shelby and Kimberly made, which I think is critically important, when you have powerful women taking the first step, because the gateway here was Ashley Judd, right? Someone who stood up and said, hey, this happened to me, and gave the other women in lesser positions of power cover.
And put her name behind it.
And put her name behind
That
it.
was key.
And the faith that the community has in her. But I just want to add that I think that the last 18 months, considering what happened during the presidential election and the Access Hollywood tape, actually was the beginning of the watershed of people talking about sex harassment more openly. And that's something that obviously happened here, as you discussed in the last segment. And I think that that's critically important.
This story and this issue are not going away. Jessica Tarlov, Shelby Holliday, thanks very much, Kimberly. We'll see you a bit later. Ahead in our New York edition, nearly half of Americans believe news outlets just make stuff up about Donald Trump. That's stunning. But first, as we were just talking about, legions of women telling their sexual harassment stories under this Me Too hashtag. Is this a turning point or a media fad? Trish Regan is on deck. In the wake of the Harvey Weinstein uproar, legions of women have been speaking out about sexual assault and harassment, not just in Hollywood. On Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, the floodgates opened after actress Alyssa Milano invited people to share their stories under the hashtag MeToo.
I really want this to be about the every woman's voice. I want it to be, this is your movement, women. This is your time, and if I can be the vessel and hold the bullhorn for you guys to shout as loud as humanly possible, then I'm honored to do so.
Joining me now is Trish Regan, who hosts the Intelligence Report weekdays 2 p.m. Eastern on Fox Business. And Trish, let's put Hollywood aside for a moment. What do you make of this social media explosion? More than 1 million women adopting this Me Too hashtag, speaking out about their own personal experiences.
I think it's fantastic. I think that this is exactly what needs to happen in this moment in time. Women need to take the stigma out of this, Howie, and it needs to be exposed because it's got to stop. It's got to stop. I got 2 little girls myself, and I don't want them growing up in a world where they feel as though this exists out there. It shouldn't. It should never exist. And if this can actually start to change things and start to change people's behavior, and women feel empowered because they know that they will be supported and this won't be tolerated, that's a good thing.
It's been hard in the past for women with powerful bosses or colleagues to speak out. The temptation is not to rock the boat, not to risk your job. I mean, when you were coming up through the TV ranks, did you have uncomfortable experiences?
You know, I think that the important thing is for every woman to call it out when she sees it. I really do think that because, you know, you're seeing a lot of this coming out after the fact now. Call it out when it happens. It takes a lot of courage, but I think women increasingly now have that courage by sticking together with this campaign. I think that is a tremendous direction to go in. I mean, look, I think different industries have gone through this at different times. You think about the financial industry in the 80s, Howie, and they went through a similar type of experience. You think about what media is going through now, what Hollywood is going through now, and what technology is going through now. And these are industries that didn't experience it earlier, but they're getting their acts cleaned up, and they absolutely need to do that.
Well, here's a countervailing view from conservative writer Heather Wilhelm on National Review. She says the social media fog has created the impression that for women, monsters are everywhere, that Weinsteins lurk around every corner. In other words, that maybe this paints too dark a picture.
She's saying that the Me Too campaign does that?
The Me Too campaign, yeah.
Listen, I mean, Me Too is not actually exposing anyone, number one. And saying Me Too is very different than, you know, I mean, Harvey Weinstein, my goodness, I mean, what a creep. And it sounds like, judging by these allegations, he may find himself behind bars, Howie. I mean, this was really, really bad stuff. And you're talking about allegations of rape and assault. Saying Me Too is very different, and I don't think it's anywhere near the level of what Harvey was doing, but it's an important thing to do.
Some women have assault stories, some women just say the situations made them uncomfortable. But look, Hollywood, the community says
a woman should never feel uncomfortable, though, and that's what I really have a problem with. You should never feel uncomfortable in the workplace, period. You should never feel as though you are being pressured into doing anything because there's an opportunity for you. A woman should never feel that. And if it takes something like this, the Me Too campaign, to make men aware of that, so be it. I mean, we live in different times and the pendulum swings, I get it, but this is for the better. This is for the better of all women and men.
It's amazing how much of an open secret we now know this was, the Weinstein case in Hollywood, among many journalists, insiders, publicists, lawyers, agents. But Hollywood has always said as a community, we're about feminism, but now there is this whole dark underbelly exposed by the Harvey Weinstein ugliness.
Really ugly. And, you know, I've always considered myself a feminist, and that's a bit of a loaded term, in part because I think Hollywood has hijacked that term. To me, if you believe in women, if you believe in the equality of women, you believe in whatever a woman wants to do with her life, whether it be become CEO, become president, stay home with her children, all of those things are of value. But in Hollywood, they have taken the term feminism, Howie, and they've corrupted it to be only what they want. So you can't be a feminist if you don't sign up for their politics. And now we're learning that their politics allowed this creep to do what he did for so many years, and they all knew about it, but nobody was willing to say a darn thing.
until now.
Yeah.
Trish Regan, great to see you in person.
Good to see you. Thanks, Howard.
Thanks very much for joining us this Sunday. Coming up here in New York, the president broadens his attack on fake news, but if you haven't noticed, he's spending more time than ever with reporters. What gives? We'll ask Kimberly Guilfoyle in just a moment. President Trump broadened his attack on the press this week using his favorite venue, Twitter. So much fake news being put in dying magazines and newspapers. Only place worse may be NBC News, CBS News, ABC, and CNN. Fiction writers. And a new poll by Morning Consult and Politico says 46% of voters believe major news organizations fabricate stories about Trump. Just plain make them up. 37% don't believe that. That's just stunning. I'm back with Kimberly. You know, I've written about fraudulent journalism. I exposed Jason Blair at the New York Times, Jack Kelly at USA Today. But as a journalist, I find the notion that nearly half the people say we make stuff up pretty depressing. It's pretty rare, actually.
Listen, there's some fantastic, phenomenal journalists in this country who do a really incredible job in terms of researching their stories, many that travel overseas, those that cover in military and conflict areas. And so we owe them a large thank you and credit for the work that they do. However, I have seen in the media where people will take stories that are thinly sourced or say, I have a source, I have one other source, and there's no truth to them. So he's seeing that up close and personal, because nowadays anybody can quote say they're a journalist when they're not, if they can start a blog and have a cell phone and take a picture, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the president actually tweeting this morning that this is finally sinking through, referencing this very poll, and he says lost cred, the media have lost credibility. But look, unfair journalism, biased journalism, inaccurate journalism, sure.
Mainstream media.
Making stuff up is a serious indictment.
Well, that's a separate whole, indictment, and I think you have to be more individual and specific in terms of, who's doing what. But we've definitely seen that. How many stories have we seen have to be walked back or retractions or revisions when they've said stuff about President Trump? The bottom line is there is a thirst that doesn't seem to be able to be quenched for the mainstream media that wants to put forward stories that are negative about the president. They don't want to talk about all the positive job numbers and the economy and what he's doing with immigration, or what he's doing as it relates to national security or ISIS getting decimated, because that doesn't fit their narrative.
And you know who agrees with this? Jimmy Carter telling Maureen Dowd in the New York Times this morning, media harder on Trump than any other president. Feel free to call him mentally deranged. But now, despite the president, keeping up his constant attack on what he sees as unfair, unbiased, and inaccurate journalism, he's talking to reporters more than ever before. He's having news conferences. He's taking questions at the helicopter. What explains this paradox?
Well, that should be applauded, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
He's been one of the most transparent and available presidents that we've seen in American political history. But that's not good enough for them. They'll find another reason to criticize him. You should be happy that he's out there tweeting, that he's telling you exactly what he thinks, that he's not hiding behind a veil. He's like his own best press secretary in many ways, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders doing a great job for him too. But he's frustrated. Wouldn't you be when you see stories out there and you're like, this doesn't have any truth or merit?
Well, sure.
They don't give him credit for what he's accomplishing.
Every president gets frustrated with the press, but ABC's Jonathan Carl says he's had more opportunity to question President Trump in the last 2 months than he had with Obama in the last 2 years.
Right.
Let me just move
But they're far more disrespectful to President Trump. They didn't ever treat President Obama like this. And my point is there shouldn't be a double standard. It's very unfair, and it doesn't serve the American people who are thirsty and hungry for knowledge and accurate reporting.
Let me slip in a last question about Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who was asked about the potential to prosecute journalists for doing their jobs at a hearing. Take a look.
Will you commit to not putting reporters in jail for doing their jobs?
Well, I don't know that I can make a blanket commitment to that effect, but I would say this: we've not taken any aggressive action against the media at this point.
Is it troubling that he wouldn't rule out going after journalists legally for doing their job?
Well, and this was the question specifically was criminal, and the point is there may be civil remedies that you could bring if somebody is liable per se and defamation.
Right.
But as it relates to reporters doing the job, you have to let them do. That's one of the things that makes this country great: a free American press that's not afraid to ask the questions. So if you're in a position like that, you've got to answer the questions. You can be frustrated maybe with some of the content, but then you get out there and tell your side of it, and go ahead and tweet and do what you're going to do. And that's what makes this country great. And we have a president that's not afraid to do that.
And by the way, it was the Obama administration Republican that used domestic surveillance against AP, against Fox's James Rosen.
Totally improper.
So I hope we're not going to see a return of that. Kimberly Guilfoyle, great to see you here in New York.
Great to see you too.
Thank you so much for joining us. After the break, Kennedy is here with a look at Jimmy Kimmel saying he doesn't really care if his political crusades are costing him Republican viewers. Jimmy Kimmel has become something of a liberal crusader on health care and gun control. The ABC comedian says he knows he's driving conservative viewers away, and that's fine by him.
3 years ago, I was equally liked by Republicans and Democrats, and then Republican numbers went way down, like 30% or whatever. And, you know, as a talk show host, that's not ideal, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. But if they're so turned off by my opinion on health care and gun violence, then I don't know. I probably won't want to have a conversation with them anyway.
And joining me now is Kennedy, who hosts the show called Kennedy, 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox Business. So look, I get that Jimmy Kimmel believes his heart's in the right place, speaking out about Obamacare after his infant son's surgery and about Las Vegas, his hometown, after the massacre. But how did he sound right there when it comes to Republican viewers?
He sounded glib, and I think that's why Bob Iger came out and made the statement that, you know, he's yeah, exactly, like the parent company of ABC, he's there to entertain, he's there to be a comedian and host a late night comedy show, and you know that's the directive he's been given. It's really tough when you put yourself out there politically and you realize that half of the audience who's consuming it wants to cannibalize you. It's very difficult, and it's hard to come back from that. And so hosts like that, you know, and Jon Stewart found this out, if you're going to do it, you kind of have to go all in. You can do a comedy show that's political, but you really have to make some of those tough choices, and that means you are alienating a large swath of people. If he can do that and still carry a late night franchise, you know,
But,
all right, have at
you know,
it.
we used to think people want to be entertained at 11:30 at night. Is this the new normal? I mean, except for Jimmy Fallon, is kind of apolitical. The audiences expect Kimmel and Colbert and Seth Meyers and the others to wrap their humor in politics, which in this case means liberal politics.
That's fine, and they can wrap their humor in politics, and there's nothing more absurd. There's no more absurd branch or material than, you know, politics and politicians themselves. And they're constantly putting themselves out there, and they're such fantastic fodder. The problem is you have to realize, and this is the difficulty, a lot of those hosts live in a bubble. They work around people who agree with them, share their worldview, and have the same politics, whether it's people at work or people they associate with, so they assume the rest of the country is like that. The rest of the country is vastly different. We are all in search of the American dream, and the thing I will say about Jimmy Kimmel, he realized the American dream. I mean, his success story is really something where he conquered an industry that is quite difficult on his own terms. And he should realize that there are other people trying to do the same thing who might have slightly different philosophical means, and that means Republicans as well. So don't just alienate them because you see things differently on a couple of issues.
All right, let me move you to another media controversy. A lot of attention paid to two former presidents giving speeches that didn't mention Donald Trump by name, but were obviously aimed at the current president. Take a look.
We are rejecting a politics of division. We are rejecting a politics of fear.
Our politics seems more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and outright fabrication. We've seen our discourse degraded by casual cruelty.
So are many pundits embracing particularly what George W. Bush said, because he's a former Republican president who seems to share their view that Donald Trump is a divisive president?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who feel that the president was illegitimately elected. Apparently, they haven't read the Constitution, and therefore they feel if they dislike him so much, they can use any means necessary to pull him down. And that means, you know, a lot of polemics and some conspiracy theory, and that's what we get. When you have a climate that is so divisive, and you take one side, you are automatically going to divide yourself.
But isn't there an argument? Didn't the mainstream media spend much of the time when Bush was in office denigrating him over the Iraq War and Katrina and the notion that he wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer and all that? And now he's kind of being hailed as a statesman because he's speaking out against, I mean, there's been no love lost between Bush and Trump.
he's being hailed now as a statesman because
Yeah.
it's taken so much time. And he actually went away. And, President Obama hasn't afforded himself the same luxury, and I think he would benefit from that. If he actually went away, I think he'd be a more effective tool for Democrats. But right now, people like former President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Hillary Clinton, it's all about them. It's not about the message. It's not about the economy. And in that regard, they're being hypocritical.
Yeah, it's hard for anyone to go away in this media culture. Kennedy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Howie.
Great to see you. Still to come, Rachel Maddow under fire for pushing a wild theory tying President Trump's travel ban to the ambush of American soldiers in Niger. That's next.
I think what's most important to my viewers is ensuring that America remains a country with its own voice, its own traditions, its own history, and that's what I'm going to do. Don't miss the Ingram Angle, premiering October 30th on the Fox News Channel.
Rachel Maddow spun a bit of a conspiracy theory on her MSNBC show, tying the deaths of the 4 American soldiers in Niger to President Trump, including Chad, in his latest travel ban.
On Friday of last week, the government of Chad announced that they had completed the withdrawal of all Chadian troops from their neighboring country, Niger. Right after that, that's when 4 U.S. Army soldiers got attacked by a large contingent of ISIS fighters in Niger.
So Maddow argued that the Trump ban somehow led to the Chad withdrawal, which somehow may have led to the Niger ambush. Even the liberal Huffington Post called her theory, quote, so flimsy that it could be debunked by a quick glance at a map, let alone a phone call with an expert. Now, Maddow acknowledged the criticism on Friday, but said everything she reported is true. Okay, yet in an attempt to blame Trump, she connected a bunch of dots that just don't make a plausible picture. Well, that's it for this special edition of MediaBuzz from New York. I'm Howard Kurtz. Great studio here, great crew too. We hope you like our Facebook page. We post a lot of original content there, respond to your comments. You can write to us, MediaBuzz@foxnews.com. Continue the conversation on Twitter @Howard Kurtz. Love doing the show up here. What an all-star lineup we had for you today. We'll be back in Washington next Sunday. Hope you'll join us then, 11 Eastern. See you then with the latest buzz.